Hello, everyone. I feel honored to attend this virtual conference, Education as Relating. My name is Bao Junyi from Nanjing Normal University. My major is Comparative Education. So today, my topic is the thinking logic of comparative education research. Comparison as a philosophical perspective of thinking is my first part. Comparison as a philosophical perspective of thinking exists in all thinking activities, rather than a specific research method. As a philosophy of thinking, we need to re-understand the basic issue of ontology as epistemology and methodology of comparative education. Comparison in comparative education research not only use it as the instrument level, but aims at a high level of philosophy of thinking and deeper practical exploration, which means we should discover and construct relationship of thinking. Although comparison is kind of construct and reference with unclear boundaries in daily life, it is an ontological existence in comparative education research. Comparison is both a concrete method and a methodology. It is both a concrete technique and a philosophy of thinking. It is both a substantive thinking and a relational thinking. The nominant of comparative education is a comparison itself as a higher level of abstract thinking, which is a kind of internal thinking logic of discipline. This kind of thinking logic is the relational thinking, a thinking process that transcends the way of existence of relations. Comparison is not just a description of facts. It has the third eye, presenting the relation being rather than the thing itself. It can be said that the comparison as a kind of relational thinking with the deeper and broader vision can see a richer variety of facts and ideal types. The transition from substantive thinking to relational thinking require erasure of thinking to demonstrate the power of comparison. Driven by the wave of globalization, the new humanistic value of the community with a shared future for the mankind pose new challenges to the thinking logic of comparative education research. It is necessary to use the relational thinking and global imagination to break the barriers, divisions, and conflicts of nation-states so as to serve the global common interest. Similarly, the uncertainty of the information age is affecting the thinking form of comparative education, and new thinking modes based on big data, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, etc., are changing the information relationship, factual relationship, or data relationship of comparative education research. Comparative education research is the processing of the world education information. It is different from the information obtained through direct experience, such as traditional visit. The height of global understanding and consciousness of a community of human destiny determine the speed, depth, and breadth of information collection and utilization, which reflects the academic sensitivity of comparative researchers. Therefore, what kind of thinking logic reflects the entirety of the comparative education research? It is challenging, orienting from the identity crisis of comparative education research, and an invitation from the world of multiple relationships. Comparison, as a philosophy of thinking, needs to transform from substantive thinking to relational thinking. So next, the second part, we talk about the substantial thinking. Comparative education research has an empirical tradition, focusing on the sorting and analysis of factual data and following the principle of modism in order to obtain the general law from the known to unknown. It often falls into the bounded entity. It is a pursuit of ultimate entity with the nature of determinism. Under the influence of substantive thinking, comparative education research emphasizes comparability by isolating each entity that can be used as an object to describe a specific cultural context, to explore the uniqueness of a conscious education research system, to simplify the reality through the conceptualization of variables. There has been two directions. One is too specific, similar to photography, but the photo is not reality itself, which is difficult to achieve the true juxtaposition. The other is too vague, similar to painting, that use the surrealistic technique to depict the situation. As a result, a comparison has become a kind of unpredictable mask in the cloud. It seems that statistics data can be verified but lost its essence, which become an unresolved digital game or exaggerate performance. The dual dilemma brought about by the two directions points to a path to the identify with the knowledge-power relationship, to recognize the political opposition between the left and the right, and to make it clear that country's crisis is facing increasing inequality while maintaining its legitimacy. When domestic education problems are predominant, the effectiveness of the performance plan is still uncertain. The successful precedents in developed countries have emerged. Foreign policies have become a model, and both feasibility and legitimacy seems to be available at the same time. The medical inertia of substantive thinking lacks endogenous legitimacy, extensive reliance on the positives methods to attempt to replace the data with conceptual variables will make us ignore the second part of knowledge-power relations, acknowledging the cultural relativism linking cultural diversity and human emancipation to social progress. Emancipation to social progress. Therefore, we should develop a way of thinking based on the non-Cartesian ontology, which not only overcome the objective physics that focus on material structure, but also abandon the constructive phenomenology that emphasize cognitive forms. In other words, we need to face up the non-science part of the comparative education, including uncertain truths and inaccurate concept. That is because simplification of reality and differentiation of objects will weaken the richness and complexity of objects. The process of simplification is often the process of stripping the complex relationships between physical objects, which may be the key to understand. We do not deny the importance of atomized individuals in rational analysis, but for comparative education research, we cannot ignore relational existence and thinking inspiration. So that is our key words and main concepts. That's relational thinking. Is our third part. Different from the comparison as a instinctive thinking habits. Comparative relational thinking is a thinking way that transcends the individual and community, a dialectic pointing to a social practice and a thought tool for the social practice theory to overcome duality. In comparative education research, relational thinking recognizes the importance of relating the relations of relations and is more committed to constructing the relations between relations rather than construct between entities. It attempts to integrate structuralism and constructivism and promotes relation between the theoretical research and empirical research in the process of conceptualizing social and cognitive structure. Pierre Bourdieu once chose the term structural constructivism and constructive structuralism to emphasize the dialectical connection between the objectivism and subjectivism. And some scholars attribute these theoretical features to generative structuralism. Thus, combine the ontology of relational being, the epistemology of generative structuralism, and methodology of relationalism. Relational thinking has a comparative research value beyond substantive thinking. The philosophical meaning of relational thinking is based on rational rationality. Rational rationality advocates that coexistence precedes self-existence. Better relationship creates better existence. The world's fundamentals are the life space unfolded by the coexistence of the self and the other. Relational thinking abandoned the ontological pre-existence and puts the relations in the first place. As Gergen said, we must strive to create a new description of human behavior and replace the assumption of bounded self with a relational perspective, not the relationship between independent selves, but the coordination process that precedes self-existence. Substantive thinking is suitable for expressing the state of thinking, but cannot express the dynamic of relationships. The tendency of language to highlight entities and sacrifice relationships which make us distinguish unconsciously. Our thinking stops at observation of the division so that we cannot grasp the complex logic of in reality. Therefore, we need to reshape the relationship as a comparative study of ontology, flip the logical order to the entity in order to generate the deep motivation of relational thinking. First, overcome the substantive thinking. The paradox of modernization is that individuals are trapped in self-centered but increasingly become a hollow man under the control of instrumental rationality and subjective rationality. While pursuing self-realization, they derive themselves as instrumental people. The thinking consciousness of rational relational rationality is an important ideological prerequisite for people obtain reality. Relational rationality will redefine the reality of existence, transcend object and subject rationality, transform to rational existence. From then on, the individual is a multi-dimensional people in relations rather than a substantive one-dimensional people. Second, construct a true community through practical rationality. On the basis of acknowledging the subjective and objective rationality, it is neither returning to the primitive community that dwarf the subject, nor is it a base with the illusionary community centered on individual reality and subjective rationality. But to solve the practical problems, the channel between selves and the others provides the possibility for a real sense of commonality. This sense of commonality does not come from the same, but from the renaissance of identification, of the identification of differences arising from the interaction with relationship. Zhao Tingyang, a Chinese philosopher, think that we need more rational and fuller rationality so as to deepen enlightenment, because personal rationality creates problem, cumulative rationality talks about problems, and rational rationality solve the problems. This is the importance of relational methodology. Accordingly, to practice relational rationality will become a rational leap in comparative research, generate rational thinking, which is the transformation of researcher's role from observer to thinker, from bystander to actor, from researcher to linker. Relational thinking focuses on relationship, and in the relations with the characteristics of complexity, openness, and ambiguity. It is the functional significance lies in change and exchange. We have spared no efforts to simplify complexity and eliminate ambiguity. This is the limitation of substantive thinking under the discourse of Western modernism, a kind of design to make education stronger, safer, predictable, and free from risks, but it makes education divorced from the real world. In fact, complexity cannot be reduced to single objects or behaviors. A complex system integral is integral, and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The fluidity of its transformation cannot be reduced to a static state, which predicts the exchange of energy. Eliminating ambiguity can't make difference clear or disappear. We have the habits that characterize things that maybe others are different from me in in three parts, or let the difference be replaced. Other are no different from me, or kick the difference out of the scope. Others have nothing to do with me, which all this make us lose the opportunity for dialogue. So Pierre Bourdieu strongly opposed the blind pursuit of excessively rigorous logic and non-existent anthropological consistency. The real comparison is not in simple and abstract structure, but in concrete and complex details. We are not looking for difference in university, but observing complexity and gazing at specific details. Each element in pluralism is always presenting in fair manner that's conducive to its own presentation. It's internalized the structure of people's profit and preferences. As William Dorr advocates, we could regard complexity as a new discourse of practice, reasoning, thinking, narration, digging out the importance in between, and accepting a new thinking perspective, using the complex system to work, being open to things that not yet been seen, have not been appeared, allowing us to see the possibility. We firmly believe that ambiguity uncertainty, and openness to unpredictable things must be an indispensable part of thinking and teaching. In traditional comparative education research, countries are conceptualized in systematic typology, which aim to describe a single linear process to assume universal term, which the complexity and diversity also disappear. The comparative interpretation in relational thinking is neither guided by the general principles of universalism, nor it is the reductionism of micro-social model, but to embody the complexity of a complete causal network by absorbing the inductive reasoning methods. Creatively open up a path to obtain, organize, and analyze information. It is not only a special skill for establishing relation between relations, but also analytic logic equivalent to experiment. Hence, comparison can be advanced into a explanatory theory dedicated to transformation, upgrading function models by upgrading thinking perspective. Compare with the limits and the strict substantive thinking, the multi-type and flexible relational thinking seems ambiguous, but it can outline the connection with daily life. In face in the face of complexity, people's instinctive reaction is at a loss, but complexity is not equal to confusion. Uncertainty does not mean incapacity. The inconstant interpretation is not necessarily a bad thing, but changes in the phenomena between the chaos may have a unique causal chain waiting to be discovered. Accuracy may lead to fallacy, while vagueness may lead to truth. Not rely on a definite and precise path is the beginning of our reconstruction of knowledge and change actions. This means that comparative education scholars should gain strength in the complex transaction maintain the constructive power of active transformation instead of using the definite results that bring us the sense of stability and accomplishment in research. This is the biggest challenge. This is the biggest challenges facing relational thinking. Face complexity, remain open, tolerate ambiguity, and even create uncertainty to express an accurate feeling and discover the nature of world's dual reality. It represents the flexible tension, adjustable concepts, and a sense of practice that generate subjective and object structure, the possibility of establishing relations between relations, and the creativity of relational thinking in comparative education research. As a result, comparison may become a dialogue of generative structuralism, flow experience in complexity, invoke wisdom in diversity, and seek existence in relations. So this is my speech today, and this is my email. And if you have any questions or have any thoughts that want to talk with me, please send me the email. Thank you. And this the two photo is our university, Nanjing Normal University, and welcome the friends from all over the world to visit my university and enjoy the good time. Thank you.